Big Sports Radio continues. Larry, Mike, and Brad as we're getting ready for college football season. Look, you can't talk college football this decade without somewhere along the line. You better get Georgia in there because the Bulldogs are loaded once again. And joining us to talk more about UGA, Patrick Garbin. He's a writer for UGAsports.com. Does a lot of things over there in Athens. Patrick, good to talk to you. Welcome to the show.
Larry, appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about obviously this is the summer of change, right? I mean, we're going into 2024 and so much has changed even since the championship game. Just take a look at those two programs and the upheaval they've had at Michigan and at Washington. But it feels like one of the constants really with Kirby Smart there has been Georgia. Our people are kind of looking around in terms of, a favorite this year. Lest we forget that the Bulldogs had every right to be in the playoff, just weren't selected to be one of those Final Four. We could be talking about a three-peat right now.
True. I tell you, the one thing that strikes me, what Kirby Smart has done with his program before Kirby Smart, arguably, I don't know if you could say top 10 all time, but certainly top 15 program all time Georgia. But yet they weren't in a preseason top five, say the AP poll, just three times. And it's from 1950 all the way up to 2017. Well, this year it will be the seventh consecutive time Georgia will rank in the top five in the AP poll. And coming from already a significant traditional power, it just shows that Kirby's come in. He certainly has raised the bar. And this is where Georgia football will be. They will be preseason ranked number one when the AP poll comes out.
It's an amazing schedule that is played this year. You look at kicking off against Clemson, and people are already looking forward to that game. But yet, finally, we get a Georgia-Alabama regular season game. We don't see that enough. It's not like the Big Ten where Ohio State and Michigan play each other every year. And then in October, you've got Georgia and Texas. And then you think about the other teams, Ole Miss, Tennessee, et cetera. Is this the best Georgia schedule that you've seen in your time covering them?
I tell you, it may be, as we sit here today, may be the most difficult. I mean, and granted, Georgia will be favored in these games, even when they go out to Texas. I think currently they're a small favorite, maybe a 2-point favorite or something like that. But still, I mean, it's a gauntlet. I mean, you got as you mentioned, Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss on your schedule. You got to go there. Fortunately, all three of those games, they're 3 weeks apart. So there is, they don't have to go back to back or anything. But as you said, Mike, you start off with Clemson too, and they got to go play Florida and Jacksonville also. And so it could very well be the most difficult I've seen, especially in recent memory.
I think it's one thing we were talking before as we're talking with Patrick Garbin of UGAsports.com. We don't see many SEC teams go north to play some of the tougher Big Ten teams. And yet we've got that. I think Alabama heads north, Wisconsin or Texas heads north, or Wisconsin. I don't know. What is it about? It just feels like it's a whole new world. And not only do you have obviously the expanded SEC and bringing in Texas, Oklahoma, another dynamic, even though Nick Saban has gone from Alabama, it just feels like that the Big Ten and the SEC are kind of saying, hey, listen, we're kind of we are the big boys now. There's no question we're the biggest boys on the block. Let's make sure that we do some things to make sure that it comes down to November in the selection committee that we get as many spots as possible. And that means maybe giving up a cupcake in September to make sure we get that stronger opponent on our schedule.
Yeah, and I think now where the viewpoint is with the expanded playoff, and there's 12 teams, and let's face it, I mean, a 9-3 Georgia team could maybe get in at one of those lower spots. So it just changed. I think that, and with the mindset that once you make the playoffs, anything can happen. So to go along with what you said, Larry, I think also with just the aspect that there's going to be a lot of teams shooting for a national title suddenly at the end of the year, and you know, 4 to 6 of those could be say from one of those two conferences. You never know. You never know. So, or combined is what I mean of those two conferences. So, and that's a lot of teams coming from two conferences. So it should be fun though.
With Nick Saban exiting college football, leaving a void, is Kirby Smart planning on taking that over? You think that's in part of his plan, or is that something maybe he's got in his own mind and won't share that with anybody?
I think the latter of what you said. What I've always felt about Coach Smart, he doesn't show his cards necessarily on the field, right? And certainly in his private life or what he may be thinking about, like professionally. Um, he's a competitor. So, and that's a big question Georgia fans always wonder, especially how successful he's been, is how long is he going to be around? You doubt he goes to the NFL. You seriously doubt he goes to any other college. The question would be is how long does he want to be around? He's a big family man. So, that weighs into it too. So I think only Kirby knows the answer to that question. And he probably doesn't know that answer right now, but he may in a few years.
Yeah. Well, he's making those that 8 figures a year. That's kind of walk away from it. I mean, it's just crazy. Tell us about a coach, and you were there during the Mark Richt years, highly successful coach, a team that won 9-10 games every year. I mean, didn't win the national title. But boy, he was, and Nick Saban, Alabama at the time, or at their peak. What is it about a coach that makes a difference? We're seeing Saban now gone from Alabama and replaced by Kalen DeBoer, who went to a title game with Washington. Harbaugh's gone at Michigan. What is it about a coaching staff and a coach that can take a great program like Georgia and raise it up a notch to truly one of the elite in the country?
You know what? I think I'd like to point out one thing. I think finishing is huge. And the Mark Richt era was a fantastic era. You win 10 games every year. That's saying a lot. However, those 2 to 4 losses a year toward the latter part of his era, and I used to have this written out, but every year, 1 or 2 of those games, Georgia would lose. They had a double-digit lead in the second half every year. In fact, I can name them right now, beginning about 2006 all the way through the end of his era. That would happen. Now, the beginning of the Richt era, 2001 through say 2005, 2006, that didn't happen. And under Coach Smart, things like that don't happen. And I think the difference, this coaching staff compared to the previous, they just seem to finish games. There's no 2012 SEC championship when Georgia was up by 11 points against Alabama in the third quarter and then just lost it. They look like a completely different team in the last quarter and a half. That doesn't happen anymore at Georgia, or not that I've seen.
Yeah, has he basically? There's a little bit, I guess, of Belichick in the way Kirby prepares with the detail work, and it seems like Rick. I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but in Big Ten country, he would be the John Cooper, who had an unbelievable year or unbelievable tenure at Ohio State, but couldn't win the big one against Michigan, which then made the bowl game much less important and ultimately did him in.
Yeah, it's almost like during the Richt era, Georgia just couldn't quite get to the top. I figured out something after Georgia's national title in 1980, leading up to right before their next one in 2021. During that period of time, although Georgia did not win a national title, I think they had the fifth best overall winning percentage in college football. The four teams ahead of them had multiple national titles, and a few of the teams below them had multiple national titles. But here, Georgia didn't have any. And it was just Georgia couldn't quite get to that, win that big game, win that top game to reach, say, the national title. And that's what Kirby's been able to do. Well, until last year, they kind of, as we opened with, they had, but oh yeah, two national titles the last 3 years. They'll be preseason number one. Things have changed.
Yeah, there's no question. What's the difference in the dynamic now? As we mentioned, talking with Patrick Garbin here of UGAsports.com. We mentioned Nick Saban's gone to Alabama. He was always the fly in everyone's ointment in the SEC, and he's now no longer there. Georgia now, the team to beat. Tell us about this year's program, the Bulldogs, what they have, and how likely is it that they can get the SEC title and get one of those top four spots and not have to play an opening round game in the playoff.
Yeah, I think simply put, Georgia, we'll look at their offense. It could be one of the best offenses in Georgia history and maybe in college football this year. Wide receiver, their wide receiving core. Now, granted, this is traditionally a power running program, especially if you go back in the day, but still, for what it's worth, their wide receiving core, I think, is no doubt the best in school history. I mean, it is loaded with, and granted, this is losing, say, Ladd McConkey, and then, Brock Bowers, if you count him as a tight end, but they're loaded at wideout. Of course, Carson Beck, who's the Heisman Trophy favorite, or he might be tied entering the season, but he's up there, throwing him the ball. Offensive line returns 4 starters. It's the offense is going to be solid. The defense, there's a couple questions about it. They need to force more turnovers than they have been, and I think last year they had issues stopping the run at times, which wasn't an issue, say, the 3-4 years previously. They need to get back to stopping the run. But yeah, I really, and I'm not showing my hometown bias, but I just really see Georgia, when it all comes together, certainly, if not the best, one of the best teams. And answer your question, Larry, yeah, they undoubtedly should be back in the SEC championship game and the favorite, I would think.
And do you think we'll end up at the end of the year, we'll be looking at an Ohio State Georgia matchup for all the marbles?
It's quite possibly, and I tell you, that would be Georgia. It's funny, Georgia faced Ohio State in the NIT basketball tournament this past year, and the Georgia fans, even though they had defeated Ohio State in that memorable playoff game, there still was some some anger and it was really a big deal that they beat Ohio State because it was the Ohio State. So I think a lot of Georgia fans, if they were to face Ohio State again, and you got to think with 12 teams and you're playing either 3 or 4 times in that scenario, Georgia and Ohio State, I think, are the 2 best teams entering the season. I think there's a good shot, Mike.
Yeah, no question. Patrick, we will leave it there. I know that some folks may think, oh, it's June talking football. It's never too early to talk football. Patrick, stay comfortable down there.
Oh yeah, I'll try.
In the Georgia heat in the summer. Hopefully we'll talk to you again here when we get closer to the season.
Yes, sir. Appreciate y'all having me on, Larry, Mike. Thank you.
Appreciate it so much. You got it, man. Patrick Garbin, once again, writer for UGAsports.com. The Georgia Bulldogs, he mentioned, it's amazing. It'll be the 7th straight preseason. They'll be the AP top 5, no question. One of the premier, maybe the premier program in college football right now, entering the 2024 season. Speaking Sports Radio, we've got more to come after this.